He always thought he could do everything, 10 foot tall and bulletproof.
Eric Hall's story is a snapshot of what his family calls an ever-changing world, an increasingly dangerous war, and a sad reality facing U.S. troops. Although soldiers may return home in one piece after serving their country, it is often not without having paid the ultimate sacrifice.
I nearly died.
In 2002, Becky Hall's youngest son had graduated from high school and decided to follow in his older brother's footsteps and join the military. Eric chose the Marines. In 2004, the fun-loving, competitive young man from the small southern town of Sellersburg deployed thousands of miles overseas to Afghanistan. His mother held her breath.
That is one of the scariest things you'll ever do. The only way you get through that without being crazy is you just give them to God and pray every day that they're all right, and you go on.
Eric was wounded in the War on Terror. The tank he was traveling in rolled 400 yards down the mountainside. Eric was unconscious for a short time and had to get stitches, but after 8 months of service, he returned home, safe. His family felt their prayers had been answered, but just 6 months later, in 2005, another call-up. Eric Hall was deployed to one of the most dangerous provinces in Iraq.
He was in a foot patrol in Fallujah and literally just blew half of the head off of the kid across the street from him, probably 15 feet across. Very narrow streets. He took a big shrapnel wound to his whole thigh.
Eric was flown to Baghdad and then out of the country to the National Naval Medical Center in Maryland. He was in critical condition and he was in bad shape. He had only been in Iraq 4 months.
It's the worst. It feels like the worst thing in your life.
Half of Eric's left quadricep had been blown off. He had serious nerve damage to his hip and right wrist, but he was alive. Over the next 7 weeks, Eric Hall endured multiple surgeries to repair his leg. Muscle was removed from his stomach to fill the wound. A skin graft was used and a metal rod inserted. His physical injuries had begun to heal, and Eric went back home to Indiana.
At this point, are you thinking, wow, the worst might be behind us?
Right, that we can only go up from here. But you could see that when he got here, he didn't fit in here. This didn't feel right.
The flashbacks and hallucinations had started.
He was very distracted. He was very fearful. He slept with a pistol under his pillow. He would wake up screaming in either pain or fear. When he started driving, he always kept an extra knife in the car.
Eric's longtime friend and former girlfriend noticed a difference too.
The next year was probably the worst. Probably the worst.
In the year or more that followed, the Hall family's strength would be tested. Eric suffered from chronic pain and was in and out of physical therapy. He developed a substance abuse problem, the result of the heavy medication he took for the pain. Eric was eventually diagnosed by the military with PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. The Hall family quickly learned of the VA's bureaucracy, red tape, and what they say it's like to be ignored and tossed aside by the U.S. military.
They asked him to do they trained them to do the most horrible things that goes against everything they've been taught their entire life. They build them up for that. But when they send him home, they send him through a 2-week program at that time on the naval base of readjustment.
Many soldiers never really do readjust. An estimated 300,000 to 500,000 troops are coming back home from the war in both Afghanistan and Iraq with some type of major depression or post-traumatic stress. And many experts believe little is being done to help them.
It's becoming a large problem, at least partially because the VA so woefully underestimated the number of people who would suffer from it. We're continually in a state where the VA is kind of behind the 8 ball.
For years, the American Legion has lobbied Congress on behalf of soldiers for increased funding for the PTSD treatment, for increased screening, and to get more psychiatrists hired.
There aren't a sufficient number of healthcare providers to account for all of the needs of those who do have PTSD.
Supply and demand. Too many soldiers with mental illnesses and not enough people or money to treat them.
They want to make the system so difficult that they give up. Because I've talked to so many people, young men that have told me that they wanted to get into counseling. They tried. They were put on a 6 to 9 month waiting list. At that point, if I'm going to commit suicide, I'm already dead.
In January of this past year, Eric left home, bound for Southwest Florida. He had relatives there, and his friends and family here thought a change of scenery might do him good.
Going down there was like a fresh start.
But it wasn't one that would last. Eric struggled with flashbacks and nightmares, lingering symptoms of his PTSD.
He was away from home. He couldn't get a hold of Mom, which was safety net. We were a safety net. He was having intensified PTSD episodes. He thought the house was surrounded with Iraqis, people that were out to get him. He was with my mother. He motioned her to come inside. He knelt to pray. He took his invisible gun. He looked through the house, checked the bedrooms, could see them all outside. He said, I've got to go, apparently trying to pull fire away from him. Got on the motorcycle.
Eric Hall was missing. Local authorities were notified, and after the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office suspended its search efforts, Becky Hall organized a private search party to find her son herself. 5 weeks later, she did.
It was the most devastating thing in my life. I found skeletal remains of my youngest son. That's the hardest thing I've ever done. I was devastated. I was just devastated. There's no way I can ever tell you how hard that is.
The coroner never determined how Eric died. His parents think their son was delirious when he got off his motorcycle to smoke a cigarette and accidentally started a fire. They believe he crawled into a culvert to escape the flames and died of smoke inhalation. Eric Hall was only 24 years old. It has only been 2 months now since Becky Hall lost her son, and although her pain is still palpable, she talks. She talks to raise awareness of a debilitating disorder she believes the U.S. government all but ignores. She talks to save other lives. She talks for Eric.
He will be missed for the rest of our lives, but we're not going to let him die for nothing. I won't do that.